This video is so overdue. I planned to make this back in March once I'd gotten my results back, but things rarely go to plan, and since this is my first video and all, well, I procrastinated. But it's not like I announced to the world that I'd make this video anyways, so the only person I kept waiting was myself. Anyways, hi. Probably should have started by introducing myself. I'm Jamma, or Jammas, but it's not short for pajamas, and I'm gonna be a first-year animation student this coming fall. These videos were my lifeline when preparing for my art portfolios, so I figured it was time I jumped on the bandwagon and made my own. I applied for animation programs in Sheridan and Seneca College, as well as illustration at Sheridan, which will be a separate video if any, because I feel like this video will be way too long for me to edit. I'll start by getting into my Sheridan animation portfolio, and then I'll go through the Seneca one. I'll have timestamps if you want to skip to a specific part. First off is my score sheet. I scored an 82% overall, so I did not get in, but honestly, I'm proud of what I got. The cutoff for domestic students this year was 85%, I believe, and the waitlist was 83, so I was just off the mark of getting in. I took extracurricular portfolio classes to help with my portfolio, which I know a lot of people recommend, especially if you're like me and have trouble starting things on your own without structure. It helped to have some sort of mentor who also went through the animation portfolio process. I also went to a bunch of open houses to get some advice from students and profs. One of the bigger components of the portfolio is, of course, the figure drawing. I did a lot of live figure drawing in preparation for this, but obviously there's still room for improvement. This is one thing that you have to practice a lot of, and do it consistently. There were 2 short poses and 2 long poses in this section, and in general what they look for is looser and more gestural movements for the short poses, and more understanding of form for the long poses. Make sure you understand the muscles and structure, but try to avoid drawing the poses too stiff because animation is a fluid medium and you want to show that you know that, if that makes sense. Live figure drawing is of course recommended, but it's obviously not available to everyone. I know many people that use the occasional photo from a website. If you do go this route, I recommend using websites like Line of Action or Bodies in Motion. I'll link all the resources down below. These really helped me when I wasn't in a session and I was just at home wanting to practice anatomy. Next are the 2 drawings of your non-dominant hand in a sequential motion. They will specify the action you're supposed to perform, like the instructions for 2025 were to draw your hand tossing a small object, but I know previous years it was reaching for something like a doorknob, etc. Here they really look for structure, but also motion. It's key to make sure the 2 poses look like they're related, like 2 keyframes of an animation, or the start and ending of a motion. You'll have to take a good reference photo of your hand going through the motion if you want it to look accurate, like I had someone helping me to take a good photo. You can even do a video and just pause it at certain points to get the motion correct. That actually would have been a great idea. Make sure you show the understructure of your hand and the shapes that make it up to show you know how hands work, and you definitely need clean lines for this part. To be honest, I thought this was the strongest portion of my portfolio, but who really knows? Next we have character rotation. I spent so much time on this. You want an interesting enough character, but also something you can easily and accurately rotate. This year they only wanted 4 poses: front, 3/4 view, profile, and back, but sometimes it changes, sometimes they add a 3/4 back, quarterback. So make sure you know what your instructions are. I really love the character I made for this section. I think she is such a baddie. I also ended up using this as a portfolio piece for Seneca. I know Sheridan tends to like anthropomorphic or animal type characters as well, which is why I went with this one. Where I think I went wrong here is the structure lines. I completely forgot to include them, and they need to see the underlying shapes that make up the character, and that you know what exactly the form you're rotating looks like at all angles. I spent so much time focusing on the line art being clean and the poses being consistent, so that was my bad. Next, the dreaded perspective drawings. At least for me, who had never once dared to draw an accurate background in their life. I did a bit of practice for this, but honestly, most of what you need to know, other than a basic understanding of perspective, is composition and storytelling. those are maybe the most neglected aspects in other videos, and it really is the make or break of your perspective piece. My perspective was alright, but I struggled coming up with interesting settings and compositions, especially when I was brainstorming. Everyone always says to have a strong fore, middle, and background, but I still found it challenging when coming up with ideas. Make sure you're telling a story with your settings as well. I think I failed to do that in the interior piece. I think it was too basic, so I wish I went for more of a fantasy setting, even though the instructions said I could go for a real-world place. I think a made-up setting would be easier to come up with things to fill the space with and tell a story. I was lacking there. The characters also could have been a tad more interesting. I think I just couldn't be bothered. But yeah, overall I struggled the most with composition and storytelling in my backgrounds. Definitely recommend studying other people's portfolios to know what to do better. The short animation was really fun. I spent maybe 2 to 3 whole days making sure this was true to model and smoothly animated, so I guess it makes sense that it was my highest mark. They specified the amount of frames you're allowed to have alongside giving you the character sheet, so watch out for that in the instructions. I know most people know that already, but you never know. I had to animate this jolly little plastic cup guy. I was actually pretty surprised this year they took a shift with their character models across the board. The objects all used to be rectangular for like the past 5 to 6 years at least, but this year was not only a cylinder, but it had a face. I assume they'll do the same this upcoming year, so make sure to animate facial expressions too. If they give you facial expressions, they're likely looking for more character acting in your animation as well. I don't have much to say other than stay on model, and oh, I can't believe I forgot. Definitely study the 12 principles of animation. That's how you make a smooth and interesting and generally good animation. There's tons of videos online, I'll even link one down below. I almost submitted my animation without the 2 lines on the cup because it blended in with the lines on the character reference sheet, so do not forget to double check the model. Last but not least, before the personal art section, the dreaded storyboards. Guys, whoa, this was actually hell. They changed up the requirements again this year and I wasn't expecting it. I was not ready. It used to be just one 4-panel storyboard with a given character and theme, which I was already mentally preparing myself for, but now you have to make 2 storyboards. The first was the same 4-panel story beat with the provided character, except this time we had to choose the theme. And the second was a looser, longer storyboard with the range of 10 to 12 panels, and a character of our choosing, and a theme that they provided. Bro. Also, the theme was so weird, I literally had no idea what it meant. It was motivation, action springs out of what we fundamentally desire. What happened to don't judge a book by its cover? That would have been so much easier. Because I didn't have any prior student examples to reference for this part, I really had to wing it and interpret the instructions myself, which sucked because I hate written instructions. The most important part for this section was, of course, storytelling, composition, and characters being on model. You want a variety of angles, but you don't want to cross the 180-degree line. It's a rule in film and animation that makes a scene easier to follow. Basically, in most situations, the camera should stay within 180 degrees of its starting point at the beginning of the scene, in order to make it more readable. Otherwise, it can be easy to get disoriented as an audience and not know which way the characters are facing. Hell, even making it, I got lost. For the longer storyboard, I'd recommend also acting out or drawing a small diagram of where your characters are placed throughout the scene, so that you can keep track yourself of where they are. Since it's much longer than the original 4-panel beats, I found myself forgetting where the character was facing sometimes. Also, draw the characters you're using repeatedly in order to make sure they look consistent. I think I could have drawn the platypus more, it's a common pitfall that people make, so I really should have known better. Regardless, I hope for everyone's sake they just go back to the 4-panel storyboards. That shit was rough. Like the whiplash I got when I saw it in the instructions? Blasphemy. I'm not going to go too deep into the personal work. For the sketchbook, I mostly wanted to include some people studies I did while I was on vacation or just outside, as well as some character sketches, which I do a lot of. I also had some multimedia things in there. It's important to make it visually appealing and have variety. I personally was not about to make an entire new sketchbook forged for the sake of this portfolio, so most if not all of what I used was from my existing sketchbook I had for like 3 years. But I only included the recent good stuff. As for the other pieces, I grouped together some concept work for different stories I have, which I don't know if they fucked with, to be honest. I think it was too repetitive. I also did a short animation of a character of mine, which I really liked at the time, but looking back I can see many areas of improvement. In my opinion, the best personal piece of mine was the 3D room model I made out of foam board, paper, and popsicle sticks, among other things. I drew concept art for it digitally, and then also concept art for the character that lives in the room, and then I made the model to show my understanding of 3D spaces and storytelling. Whew, okay. This one will be much shorter because there's some repeats and there's just less requirements overall. I got accepted into Seneca Animation, and that's where I'll be going in the fall. I'm really excited about it, and I hope I can help anyone looking to apply, because when I was looking for videos, there was only like maybe 4 at most. I went to the open house and met some students that went there, and I learned a lot, and the student works were pretty cool to look at. Seneca's portfolio focuses a lot on real-world studies or application. You'll see what I mean by that. And Sheridan does that too, with your skills and your fundamentals, but it's a bit different. The requirements haven't changed in like a decade, so at least there shouldn't be any surprises, looking at you, Sheridan, so you can be prepared. First, they ask for 2 figure drawings. I chose 1 short pose and 1 long pose from the ones I used for Sheridan, since they didn't really specify how long they were supposed to be. The same goes for the hand drawings, which many people just use the same non-dominant hand drawings for Sheridan since there are no specifications on what the hands are supposed to do. I spoke to a professor from Seneca, and even he said to reuse the drawings. If you're applying for 2 or even 3 schools like I was, it does get a lot, so reuse as much as you can. Next are the 2 perspective drawings. It's different from Sheridan in that they ask you to draw a room in your house from opposite corners, so it's based on observation. When drawing this part, make sure to include little details like trinkets you have lying around in the area or smaller furniture, because they want to see that it's a space with a story and that it looks lived in. Even though you're mainly trying to get an accurate perspective of a real-world place, make sure to include the character of it too. Also make sure to add line variations so that the foreground has thicker lines and the background has thinner lines. Line quality is important. Trust me, they do look that closely. Last but not least, 2 object drawings. These sucked, to be honest. For me at least, because I never draw objects. You want to choose everyday objects found in your kitchen or around the house with interesting shapes. Don't cop out by picking something formally simple. This is your chance to demonstrate your knowledge of form, perspective, and observation skills. Again, line quality is important, as well as including the little details of the object, like the text on the stand mixer for mine, because they care about the small things. They will check, guys, I'm so serious. You can only include 2 personal works for Seneca, and I wasn't allowed to submit any videos in Slide Room where we submit our portfolios, so I didn't use the short animation that I liked. Honestly, for someone who's really indecisive, having only 2 slots for personal work was a blessing in disguise. Seneca wants to see your storytelling capabilities as well as your fundamental skill, and that's basically the same for Sheridan as well. You don't have to be perfect because their program focuses on teaching those skills as well, but that's why there's very little imaginative pieces like in Sheridan's portfolio. Instead, you showcase your storytelling through the personal and perspective sections. For the personal art, you also want to demonstrate these observation skills and fundamentals of art. I used 1 slot for my sketchbook, which had observations, studies, and character drawings. It was the same for Sheridan. And for the second, I submitted a version of the character rotation I did for Sheridan with one of the poses colored in to show what the gecko lady looked like when colored. And that's done. If you're curious about my Sheridan Illustration portfolio, I did get accepted into that program, and I will be making another video about it later. I noticed there aren't many recent ones with commentary on it, so I'll try my best to add to the pile. When I was looking for examples, I found, like, nothing. Overall, I recommend reaching out to students, taking portfolio classes or mentoring, and attending things like portfolio review on National Portfolio Day, but also open houses to get a better idea of what you need to succeed. Above all though, these things take time. Start early and practice a lot. Knowing myself and my work ethic, I should have known I would procrastinate and take as long as I did, and I should have prepared better. My portfolio's quality might have suffered for it, so definitely don't take that risk. Especially if you're like me and intend to apply to multiple art schools that each require different portfolios. Do yourself a favor and don't underestimate the time and effort it takes. If you have any more questions, please feel free to comment and I'll do my best to help. I plan to do more art videos in the future, so subscribe if you're interested in seeing what I do next. I also might look into vlogging my experience once I'm in college, so if you're curious about animation as, a major, definitely stick around. Alright, I'm done. Hope this video helps someone out, and see you in the next one.